Are you someone who is looking for another source of revenue to add to your income or create financial freedom? Well, keep listening as we discuss some ways we increased our own income and built our net worth in the process. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Lisha Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Naomi Lawrence-Reid.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income. That means that if we were, for some reason, unable to work due to a car accident, a medical illness, a chronic condition, mental health disorder, that we still have money coming in. Because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. And so one of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance. And I know, as well as anybody, that getting this is not necessarily fun, and all insurance agents are not created equal. However, Pradeep Otto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They are who you want to contact if you need long-term disability insurance or life insurance. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best. If you're in need of life insurance or disability insurance, be sure to reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. All right, Dr. Naomi, I know that in a prior episode, you were kind of talking about all of your fun travel plans. And every single episode, you mic drop us with all of the fun, cool places in the world that you're traveling. And sometimes I will get a little nosy and ask who you're going with and ask how you planned this whole thing.
Sure.
But I am curious, when did you start traveling this much? Is this like a thing that you do where you take these elaborate trips we're all jealous of multiple times throughout the year?
Yes. The short answer is yes, I do. Yes, I do. To be clear, this is not the career or the way that I live. It has not been handed to me. I have put this together. I have shaped this the way that I want to. So please know that if you're out there listening and you're watching some influencer travel people or even influencer travel doctor people, and you're like, wow, their boss, their medical director, their department chair lets them do that. Girl, no, that's not what's happening for any of us. Okay. So we are all out here creating the lives we want. In the interest of time, I'll say it really did start because I do locums. And I began doing locums regularly in 2019. Jess, I was able to go about 3 hours from home. So I live in California. I was going 3 hour drive. I was not getting on a plane. I was not going to the middle of the country. I was literally just driving 3 hours, working for about a week, coming home. I was earning so much that I didn't need another clinical gig. I didn't need to pick up work while I was at home. I eventually, out of honestly boredom, started finding non-clinical remote work. But the only place I had to be was 1 week a month at that facility. After the pandemic, that turned into, okay, I'm going to go to work for a week and then I'm going to go on a trip for a week or visit a friend here or there or go around the world. It took on a life of its own. So ultimately in 2022, I made the decision. I just said, you know what? The world is opening up again post-pandemic. I never got to study abroad. How many of us pre-meds got our semester in Venice? Not too many of us. And I thought, you know what? I want my time abroad. I had a few kind of Europe trips that had been canceled and rescheduled. And I thought, I'm not going to go to Europe, back to California, and then back to Europe. I'm just going to stay. And I see people doing it all the time, and I never had. And at the time, I was in my mid-30s and just thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I went to Europe for about 6 weeks. I spent then 2 weeks on the East Coast and was like, this was great. And then came back and boom, picked up locums, picked up kind of my usual cadence, and then realized this is a great place to be, a great way to work and live, entirely flexible. I can pick up locums when I want to and not. And then all of these other non-clinical remote things I can do from anywhere in the world. So that is really how this lifestyle has begun for me.
Wow, it seems amazing. And so I'm sure some people listening are a little bit jealous, as am I. I love this. Actually, I remember when I was in medical school, actually, there was an attending, I think he was an EM physician. So he worked in the emergency room
Mhm,
and he really loved doing music and playing guitar and singing and
mhm,
was very musically inclined.
mhm,
And he was
mhm.
like, one of the reasons why I chose EM is because you only work a certain number of shifts per month. And I have all of this time where I can kind of stack my shifts and I can explore this other passion of mine. And so
Right.
it was like he chose a specialty of medicine that, yes, is high stress for sure.
Mhm.
But that specialty also gives him a little bit more schedule flexibility to
Yes.
be able to do the things that he enjoys doing. And that helps to fulfill and roundabout his life. And what I'm hearing you say is, Lisha, I may not be musically inclined, but I am travel inclined. And
Yes.
so
And I'm a pediatrician. I want your listeners to know I was definitely told this life is not possible for pediatricians. Yes, maybe for EM. You know, when I started doing locums, I'd only heard of like 2 EM doctors doing it. It felt like it
mhm.
was the thing they did because it was shift work, no continuity. Turns out there's locums in every specialty. It can be work you can pick up and put down. But exactly, it was like, first of all, no one gave me permission to live or work this way. I just want to make that clear again. This was not handed to me. I was not just educated about how to go about this. But if your listeners are listening, are a little jealous, or wanting to know more, please, they're in the right place. They're going to listen to this wonderful episode. But also just know that you are a doctor, or if you're not a doctor, you are an educated professional who can determine their own life and determine what they want out of this. Listen, we've got one life. It is relatively short. You know, you can't wait for someone to give you permission. You can't make excuses about why you can or can't do something. If it's something you want, go make it happen.
I love that. I think that segues nicely into our financial focus of this episode, which is getting multiple income streams. We know you
Yes.
do locums and you've advocated for yourself, and we know that
Sure.
you are getting paid well. But there may be some folks who say, you know what, Lisha,
Mhm.
or you know what, Naomi, locums may not be for me at this time. But what is for me is figuring out how I can get some more money so
Got
that I
it.
can then pay for the travel that I want to take. And
Yes.
so that's what we're going to get into
I
in this
love it.
episode is like multiple income streams. And
Mhm.
it's so funny because I've always been a proponent of having multiple sources of revenue or
Mhm.
multiple sources of income. But
Mhm.
I have heard this rebuttal that's like, Lisha, why do you need that as a physician? Like, you get paid so much. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Mm.
Why are you working more and wearing yourself out? And that is one of the things that I will talk to my residents about, talk to other
Mhm.
physicians about, whether it's in coaching or podcasting or talks or whatever, is like at some point you do need to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is the effort that I'm expending worth
Mhm.
what I'm getting back?
Mhm.
Because again, there's this balance of like, I want more money versus I want more time, I want more time. And sometimes
Yes.
we are trading time for money and you only have so much time in life. And so you've got to kind of
Yeah.
have that own introspection within yourself. But a
Yes.
lot of people are like, yeah, Alicia, that all sounds good. But at the end of the day, right? I need some
Yeah.
more money. Yes, I have a regular job and I want to keep it for whatever reason, but I need some more money on the side.
I need that.
I tend to lean towards that way, right? I think that when
Yeah.
you have other sources of revenue, it one gives you more money in your pocket to be able to
Yes,
do more
please.
things. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of having financial security. No woman is going to make bold choices in their life until they have the financial security to do it. It's very rare that you see people make these drastic pivots. One of the
Mhm.
first things that they think about is, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to
Right.
support my family? How am I going to maintain my quality of life? And I think it
Mhm.
is easier to make those career pivots, and it is easier to pursue your passions, and it is easier to do the things you want to do on the schedule that you want when you have other sources of revenue and you're not as reliant on one paycheck. But what is your experience? I know that you're somebody who has multiple sources of revenue. What have kind of you seen as you've like built up this portfolio, if you will, of various sources of revenue?
Well, let me start by saying it started with one. It can sound incredibly intimidating to hear about a physician who does have multiple streams of income and is doing a whole lot of different things. And if you are sitting in a full time W-2 clinical job looking from the inside out, it can say, wow, she's doing too much. They're doing too much. I'm not even going to start. I don't want to do that. But I'll say this, these full time W-2 clinical jobs are so hard. They take all of your energy, all of your time, all of your capacity, all of your creativity. So the prospect of adding anything almost sounds like, oh my goodness, another thing. Sure, there might be some money, but is it worth it? I'm already away from my family more than I want to be. I'm already not sleeping well. I already don't have time to work out. And so, listeners and people listening in who are starting to feel that way, they're hearing all of our talk about side income, but thinking, I am already so tired. I want you to know, I'll describe my personal story and my personal journey is that I went per diem. And so, the first thing I say to any physician specifically who's listening is likely from where you are right now, you won't be able to just make that perfect step over into a whole lot of side gigging, I'll say. It starts with turning down the volume on a full time clinical job. I teach that. That was my own experience. And it's maybe going from 1.0 FTE to 0.75, 0.75 to 0.51, or even better, going per diem, where you don't have any obligations, but you can still generate consistent income. It's going down on the clinical part that is so helpful. And you're not necessarily leaving clinical medicine. Some people can decide to do that, and that is such a personal decision. I am not someone who says, you know what, you're burned out, leave clinical medicine. I want you to know what your options are. For so many of us, it was going per diem, and that changed everything for me. I didn't have a whole high income, but I was paid hourly. I could pay my rent, I could pay my bills, but I could breathe. And it was so important to me. And trust me, I had plenty of shifts. So it wasn't like, well, go per diem, nothing's guaranteed, and now I can't pay anything. You can get a few per diem opportunities in your community to really make sure that you'll always have options for shifts. And then from there, it was locums. I shared on a past episode, my residency leadership said, don't ever pick up the phone when locums calls. That's not viable work. Only bad doctors, only doctors with privileging or licensing issues do locums. And it stayed with me until I was very unhappy in my full-time clinical job. And I thought, you know what? They're throwing big numbers at me. I'm looking up this hospital. It seems like a fine hospital, and I'm going to try it. And it was the best decision I ever made. And I learned how to negotiate and I learned how to do other things. And after doing locums for so long, I've been doing now locums for 8 years on and off, I picked up other non clinical gigs. But I just wanted to make sure that people know this was not handed or given to me. I had to resign from a job. I had to get another job. I had to have some difficult or uncomfortable conversations. But ultimately, I had to make the decision that this was something I wanted to pursue. And as a physician, know that you'll never not have a job. You'll never not have a job. Okay. We have infinite job security here, and we can work in new and different ways at any time in our career that we want to.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about being in medicine is that even if you get let go from your job at some place, it is not as difficult to necessarily find a different job. Now, is
No.
that different job going to be your ideal job with all the bells and whistles and all the things you want? Maybe, maybe not, right? You might have to work a little bit, negotiate for some things, but can you secure a job where you are treating patients and paid multiple six figures a year? I believe so.
Yes. Yes.
And I like what you said about creating room for the side income, because I think that that
You do.
first step is like a barrier for some people,
It is.
right? For some people who strongly dislike their jobs, are like, yes, I've been trying to cut back anyway. This is great. For other people, they're like, that sounds nice. But the reality is, I'm the breadwinner in my family and I've got kids and I've got bills and I can't afford to take a pay cut right now. Or they're like, Lisha, I can only cut down if I know I'm going to be able to replace this part of my income. Like as a physician, we're paid X amount of
Mhm.
dollars per hour. There's not that many jobs that can pay me this amount of dollars per hour out the gate. It's almost like I'm taking a risk. I'm betting on myself. I'm doing all of those things. My advice or some of the things that I say is like, I still think it's worth it. When I think
It
about
is.
my life and, it takes me back to when I was trying to decide what specialty of medicine that I wanted to go into. I knew that I wanted to do sports medicine. That was the sole reason I went to medical school. I want to be a sports
Mhm.
doc. I was an athlete
Mhm.
growing up. My entire family revolves around sports. We do family events at sporting events. Like it is a thing. And I
Okay.
knew that I wanted to do sports medicine. So that is why I went to medical school. I would not have
Mhm.
gone to medical school if I couldn't do that. But sports medicine is a subspecialty. So I needed to pick a general specialty first. And I was deciding between orthopedic surgery and primary care sports medicine. There's obviously a drastic salary difference between the two. I had a hard time deciding what am I really going to try to go into? What am I going to try to pursue?
Mhm.
And I remember sitting on this old brown couch at my apartment, talking to my dad, whom I call when I have like this hard decision to make. And to him, the decision seems so easy, but to me, it wasn't because I was essentially like, Dad, I feel like I'll get more respect if I go into orthopedic surgery, which is a whole other conversation. And I feel like I would make more money if I went into that field. And why would I choose a specialty that makes less when I could choose one that makes more? Because remember, I
Mhm.
came from the finance world. So I already knew I'm already giving up a lot to go to medical school and to
Mhm.
be a physician. And so I need to make sure that I'm getting the ROI. I need to make sure I'm getting the return on
Mhm.
my investment. And I'm not sure if I will, if I've got this amount of student loan debt
Mhm.
and this is the salary I can expect coming out when I could choose something else that makes this decision so much better, or in my mind, that would make my finances so much better. And
Mhm.
one of the things that he challenged me with is, Alicia, you can't make decisions based on what is going to make you look better to other people. And at
Mhm.
some point, you have to define success for yourself. Because if you let your version of success be tailored or attached to what you think makes you look good to other people or what other people think, then you're going to be the one in the end who's disappointed. And that has always resonated with me. That made it easier for me to choose family medicine and then sports medicine. And in this particular case, it has made it easier for me to craft a career that I really enjoy. Because I think that when I lose sight of that, right, I'm a sports doc. And when I lose sight of that and I compare myself to other sports docs who I'm sure make drastically more money than I do, I'm like, oh, I feel inadequate. I feel like I don't have enough, or, oh, whatever. Then I think about, okay, well, what was my own goal? And what was my own version of success? And for me, it wasn't working and seeing patients 5 days a week. Like, that's not what I would want to do. That's not what would make me happy. That's not what I would feel would be successful to me, even though I would make more money. Like,
Mhm.
I think I would be happier because I'm somebody who has multiple passions and multiple
Mhm.
things that I wanna do if I didn't spend 100% of my time in clinical medicine, but instead got some of my time bought out to do this thing or that thing and was able to work from home and had more flexibility. Like, yes, I am sacrificing because I could make more money if I just did medicine all of the time, but I'm happier doing this. And at some point, I had to really define what is enough to me. And, like, I am okay if you get rich doing something that I don't want to do.
Sure.
And that is like a reality because once I defined what enough was for me,
Mhm.
then I could be okay making decisions where my end goal was I'm trying to get to enough and
Yeah.
not my end goal is I'm trying to make as much money as possible. But for some people, I recognize they're like, I know what enough is and it ain't what I got. So they're like, how can I get closer? Like, Lisha, the math isn't mathing for me. I've got all of these obligations. And like, yes, maybe I could cut back and be more frugal and try to lower my tax burden and all these things. But at some point, I got to make more money.
That's right.
And I find that that is particularly true for physicians who are early in their careers,
Mhm.
physicians who are still in training, and
Mhm.
they're asking me, Lisha, what can I do to supplement my income? Do you know of other ways that I can make money? I think that there are a lot of different options, but I am curious, Naomi, like
Yes.
when you were in training and when you were, in those first 2 or 3 years of your attending hood, what are some things that you did to make more money to supplement your income, if at all?
Yes, no, please. Again, this is not a I always had it together story because I did not. I did not know anything. All of the things I talk about now were out of survival 3 to 5 years out of training. So, I was not the entrepreneurial resident, side gigging here, there, finding loopholes, doing things on my days off and vacation. Not at all. I picked up maybe a couple of moonlighting shifts, if I'm honest, as a resident. I didn't know about side gig work. Now, again, I started my first attending job in 2014. There was not as much discussion about, we weren't saying burnout. We weren't talking about side gigs. We weren't talking about alternative work models for physicians, not at all. So I didn't know. I didn't know. And it was 2017 where I hit my end of full time clinical academic medicine and thought, I got to figure it out. No one's here teaching me. No one's coming to save me, but I know I'm not happy here and I'm going to find another way to work. So, all that to say, I didn't have side gigs. So, the residents now, the medical students even asking, hey, what can I do to earn money? Let me start with your hospital doesn't really want you earning outside money. I'll tell you that straight up. So, you have to know and start with your contract. There are resident contracts that prohibit you from doing outside work or saying you got to ask permission first. So, for all the residents listening, you got to pull up that contract. Can you do anything more than moonlighting in your own facility or in your own institution? But these contracts, they are, in my opinion, pretty nefarious for both residents and attendings. And they keep our worldview this big because they want to be our only source. If we start learning the full value of our degrees, that we can be making $600, $700 an hour to work as an expert witness on non malpractice cases, if we can earn $2,000, $3,000 a day doing veteran disability exams, I suspect more physicians would take advantage of these other ways of working. $3,000 a day in a locum as a primary care locum. Like, there are so many options that doctors just don't know. And these institutions largely don't want us to know for obvious reasons. So, for physicians who are just starting to think, oh, you throw out some big numbers, and I am interested, it starts with your contract. I don't want you to violate your contract. and then to have to deal with the consequences down the road. I have seen physicians who have signed these very rigid non-competes, and then they think, you know what, I'm just going to pick up a weekend locum. They'll never know. Oh, they do. And I've known doctors who have had to pay back 50K to their hospital because they were earning side income that we're not supposed to be earning. That being said, do not sign non-competes. Get your contracts reviewed from the start, but pull up your contract and know what your obligations are to start. That's number one. For residents, there are things like paid research studies that you can be doing remotely from anywhere in the world. And those can be, they can ask about medicine, they can ask about really anything, and it can be simple, easy, click through. There are surveys about shopping, eating, restaurants, travel, credit cards. I mean, anything. This is market research. But the ones for doctors pay more, and the ones that are medical pay more. Medical writing. Anyone's a writer. We write all the time. You can write about your experiences as a medical student, as an attending. It can be about a patient, of course, HIPAA compliant, changing names and all that. It can be about really anything. I'll say doctors, when they tell me, oh, I do like to write. How do I start to become a medical writer? You just start writing. We live in a day and age where you don't have to use a quill and a pen and a feather and try to mail something out and hope it gets picked up by a publisher. Okay, that's down the road, but you can write and publish it on LinkedIn today, and it reached thousands of people. So if you're a writer and you like to write, just start writing. And after a while, you can join different organizations and you can create a portfolio, and people will approach you to write pieces. So there are many ways to at least start to think about side income. I've talked about a few things that are not clinical if I'm talking to more, residents or people kind of starting out early in their careers. But it goes back to what I said earlier about really starting to turn down the volume on full-time clinical work. And as you said, it can be intimidating to some who are like, no, I'm effectively living paycheck to paycheck. But you have to make space for that thing you want. And it can feel like a leap. It can feel like a risk. But I promise you, you have to just create space for it. And doctors working 20 hours a day, charting notes, their own obligations at home, you don't even have the capacity to start. So if you could turn down the volume of clinical, that's the first place to start.
I like it. I will talk about my story a little bit. So I don't even know if I would say I was entrepreneurial. I'm one of those people, one of my brothers says, like, you're the figure it out person. And that's me. I'm like a figure it out person. And I think it has served me well in my career because any side gig, any source of side income that I have pursued has been out of what I deem to be necessity. So it wasn't like, I just want to be this entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. It was like, I need money and I need it now. And let me tell you, desperate times, desperate measures, you start thinking real creatively. Or at least I did. So when I graduated from medical school, I had some credit card debt that I really wanted to pay down because I hate having debt. And, my starting salary was going to be like 60K a year. And I knew enough to know, hey, if I'm going to pay down this credit card debt, I'm going to need to decrease my expenses. And one of the big expenses to decrease is your rent. So I drove a paid off car. So I didn't have a car note at the time, but rent I felt like would be one of my largest expenses. And so I opted to live with a roommate for the first 2 years when I was in residency. And because of that, we split all the expenses, which meant whereas some people were paying, I don't know, around that time, maybe 1,500 or so for one bedroom apartment, something like that, I was paying half of that. And we split all the bills. And because of that, I had much more money left over to pay down credit card debt and to start saving and that sort of thing. Even with that, I was like, I could make more progress if I make more money on the side. And things are a little tight. When I'm going out to eat with my co-residents, I'm really looking at the prices and I'm thinking, do I just want to have water today? I would like to have a little bit more room. And so I actually did do a lot of writing. I come from the finance world. A lot of my classmates, even in medical school, kept asking me very similar finance questions. And I figured, why don't I write this down? So I actually started a blog when I was a medical student, actually. It continued when I was in residency. I just kept writing and publishing a blog each week. And eventually I was asked to write for other publications and other sources.
Yes.
And one of those sources was Doximity before they went public. So back in the day, I was an exclusive content writer for Doximity, and they basically paid you to write articles. But
Great.
Doximity didn't have the cash on hand at the time, which actually boded well for me. So at the time, they would pay us exclusive content writers right under the IRS threshold of what they had to report to the IRS. So our payment for the year would be $599 because if they paid us $600, then they had to report it to the IRS. And so what they said was, hey, on the back end, instead of paying you in cash, we're going to pay you in stock.
Nice.
and Doximity went public.
Sure
And
did.
so then I got way overpaid once the company went public and the stock options that I had were then matured. And so that worked out really well for me. But I ended up at the time, though, it wasn't a big
Mhm,
source of revenue for me because, again, my payment at the
mhm.
time was $599. So I needed to do something else to make
Yeah,
money. And so I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? I have a blog site and I'm already writing. I was like, I need to make money in a way that's going to like add to my revenue and not require a lot of work because I'm already exhausted. So what I did is I had this idea to monetize my website. And I
nice.
said, you know what? I'm writing about finance. Why don't I actually try to monetize this website? And I'm going to reach out to businesses and see if they would pay for ad space on my blog site.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've heard of Kevin MD.
Yeah.
He's like a very big blogger in the physician space. I maybe published like 100 articles on Kevin MD at the time. So I knew Kevin and not like we're besties. I mean, I'm publishing a lot of articles on your site. You know who I am. And he had
Mhm.
asked me to hop on a podcast with him a couple of times. I happened to talk to him offline about like, how are you monetizing your blog and all
Yeah,
of this? And he was nice enough
yeah.
to give me some pointers and also give me some ideas of like what I could charge. Cause I think that's part of the struggle is like, how much is this worth?
Right.
And long story short, he helped me out and I gained the courage and I was like, I don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
So I reached out to all these businesses and pitched myself, which I'm really good at cold call emailing and pitching myself.
Yes.
And I got ignored a lot, but some people did ignore me.
Yeah.
And some people messaged me back, and some of those people set meetings with me. And I was able to monetize my blog site, which at the time
Great.
I think I was making like $1,500 a month doing nothing extra, but
Amazing.
their ad on my website. And so that was like bringing in money. And then
Sure.
at the time I was writing for Doximity, well, even though Doximity wasn't paying me as much at the time, people saw those articles. So
Yeah.
then I kept getting asked to speak. Then I would get paid to
Mhm.
speak. And
Mhm.
then people would say, you want to hop on my podcast? And I would say yes. And then eventually I got the opportunity to be on, White Coat Investor and I was on Money Meets Medicine for a while and I was getting paid to do those things. Right. And so then that kind of morphed into, all right, I'm more visible now. People see what I'm doing now. And I
Mhm.
actually got approached to help launch a couple of physician startups. And I knew enough at that time that I want to get paid in cash and in stock options.
Mhm.
And so then I was doing work that I loved, which for me was finance work,
Mhm.
in the comfort of my home. I remember when I was like a third-year resident, I think I was making $110 an hour doing stuff from home, finance stuff that I honestly would have done for free because I loved it so much.
That's so great.
But my intent is not necessarily to brag. My intent, though, is to say that it started from I wanted to supplement my income. And when
Yeah.
I was a third year resident, instead of having that roommate, we
Mhm.
decided that we would probably be less likely to kill each other if we didn't live together.
There you go.
Because she was not only my roommate, but she was my co-resident, and so we just saw each other all the time.
Sure.
And so my point of saying that is, like, I then went from I'm sharing all the expenses to now all the expenses are on me. And so that then gave me even more impetus of like, I need more money. I gotta think creatively. I'm going to help launch these contracts and these businesses and all of these things. But it started from like, how can I get more money? How can I think creatively?
Right.
How can I advocate for myself to make sure that the pay that I'm getting is worth my time?
I'm hearing you say 2 things. One is you were not going to be a victim. That is what I wanted to hear the most of. I can't sit here and feel lament, "What was me? I'm so underpaid. I'm a broke resident. I'm a broke this. I got so much debt. I don't have a rich whatever that they have." You have to take control of your own life and, as you said, think creatively. And the other thing I heard you say is you were doing something you love to do before you were getting paid to do it. Okay. And that is specifically the writing. You were already writing, you had a blog, you liked it. You didn't wait for Doximity to find you having not written a thing. You were already writing. You had set the trap. You had created a portfolio and an online footprint for people to find you. So, specifically with writing, if you tell me you're a writer, you love to write, but you haven't written anything, I don't want to say I don't believe you, but I kind of don't believe you. You're waiting for someone to give you permission, to give you an assignment, to offer you money. Whereas with something like writing, you just have to do it. You have to do it. And you were already doing it. And then guess what? All of those other opportunities came into your life, started, and the money grew from there because you were already doing, honestly, something you were passionate about. That's incredibly impressive.
Thanks. I think for people listening to this, maybe you're not a writer. You're like, Lisha, that sounds good for you, but that's not, my forte. I think what you said is really important. What are the things that you enjoy doing that you
Yeah.
could potentially monetize? And
Yeah.
for some people, that's social media. They're on social media all the time, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, what have you. And I know so many physicians who have monetized their social media. They have a following, they charge businesses to endorse their products or what have you. And even if it's not social media, what hobby do you enjoy? I give these examples. When I was in training, there was somebody who loved to work out, like loved to work out. And so she would like gather us together and be like, it's Saturday. We're going to do this session. Meet me at this park and we're going to do it. And so that was something that she loved. And then she started to monetize it where she said, you know what? I'm going to have paid clients now that are going to pay me to teach them how to work out. For some people, what stops us is we're like, I'm not an expert in that field. I don't have a degree in that field. I don't have
Mm.
a certification in that field. You don't have to be an expert. You just need to be better than the person you're teaching. That's my mantra. I remember when I was in medical school, there was this guy who was trying to make money on the side and he was into photography. And so you know what we did? We paid him to take photos of us because who doesn't want a good photo shoot? And so
Right.
he would do our photos for graduation. He would do our photos like our headshots or whatever. And he would take all these photos of us and he would edit them and then we would pay him for it. I know some people who love to meal prep. They love to cook. And so they would charge people to meal prep for them. People who are really good at makeup or hair, they, set up their website and they have bookings and they monetize that. And so my point is it doesn't have to be writing. It doesn't have to
No.
be podcasting, but just like think about what are the things that you enjoy doing? Is there a way that you could think outside of the box and think creatively about how
Yes.
you can monetize it? Because for me, when I was in residency, I didn't want to work more shifts. I know that that's an option for some people. And for others, maybe that's the route they want to go and have at it.
It's the only one they know, but until now.
Yeah, it's like I'm already busy. I don't necessarily want to do more of the work that's going to burn me out. So I personally would prefer to do work that I would already do for free that I now could get paid to do. And so think creatively about what are the things that I could do that I could monetize
Yeah.
and just supplement my income on the side.
I think the core of at least this last part we're talking about is our whole identity is not being a physician. It's not 100% of our identity. You are also a financial expert. Yes, you talk to doctors about finances, but something tells me you have a wider audience than even physicians. So our identity is beyond just being physicians. And I think that's happening with this newer generation. Yeah, okay, I'm a doctor and I do this thing. I'm a photographer and I'm a health expert and I'm a social media content creator. It's plus. It's not I can only be a physician. Absolutely not. Now, I teach physicians how to use our education and degrees in ways that are still within the medical sphere, which tend to be very, very high paying. But yes, our identities extend far beyond this. We are also daughters and sisters and mothers and nieces and aunts and all these other things. And I think so many physicians now are understanding and recognizing we do not live in a vacuum. Being a physician is not our only identity, and it is not, quite frankly, and I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, clinical medicine every day can get very boring. It can just get boring. You start to see the same things over and over again, the same conversations over and again. You see the same kinds of patients over and over again. After a little while, you may think, you know what? I want to do something else. I have an interest. We have access to the internet and social media. We can see people and hopefully get inspired to do new and different things. So at this point, I really love seeing doctors who have this expanded perspective about who they are. And maybe they're doing new and different things within medicine or beyond it because, we can.
So I'm curious now. I know early career, right? You were like, hey, full transparency. I wasn't doing all of these things. I didn't necessarily know all of the things that I know now. But
Yeah.
now you've got multiple different
Yeah.
revenue streams. And I'm curious about some of them. What income streams do you spend, I guess, the majority of your time doing, or do you feel
Yeah.
like you get the most ROI out of? And like, what has your experience been with that?
Thank you. Great question. I talked about going per diem, step one. The second thing I did was locums. At this point, I had caught the bug. I just had caught the bug. I thought, wait a minute. I am working a quarter of the time, earning twice as much. Huh. There must be more they didn't teach us. And I started getting very curious. I went on LinkedIn. If I saw a doctor doing something different, I was DMing them. I was messaging them. And like your experience with Kevin MD, they were so forthcoming and nice and gave me tips. And so I love that you're doing this. And we don't need to keep these good things close to our chest. There's more than enough sunshine for all of us to succeed and to thrive. So I was talking to a family friend who was a surgeon in the Midwest, Iowa, I believe. He said, hey, you should start doing Botox and fillers. And I thought, excuse you, I am a real doctor. I would never do that. And he thought, okay, cute. He himself being a cardiovascular surgeon, he's like, listen, I just added it to my practice a few years ago. People were asking for it. They wanted it. I now have doubled my practice income. And quite frankly, I wish I'd started 10 years earlier. And he said, don't you work in a pediatric ER? Aren't you doing, spinal taps on babies and suturing children's faces? He's like, all of that is harder than these very non-invasive cosmetic procedures. Long story short, I ended up taking a few CME accredited courses that were just on evenings and weekends and began a small concierge Botox and filler practice. It was super fun. I still do it. I'm actually medical director for a few nurse practitioners who are starting to do that themselves. And I've enjoyed kind of that educational aspect because I've been doing it for so long, even as a pediatrician. And I get to make jokes about how I use small needles because I'm a pediatrician. Anyway, everyone loves it. That was one thing I do. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still do it sometimes. It's fun for me. It's procedural. It's cash only. It's a huge profit margin. So that's one thing. The other thing I started doing was veteran disability exams. That was a LinkedIn find. A colleague I think I'd met at a conference years earlier, she was family medicine. I stumbled upon her LinkedIn profile and I thought she was family medicine. What is all this veteran work I'm seeing? And I sent her a little DM and she said, hey, let's hop on a call. Got on a call with her. And 6 weeks later, I'm doing veteran disability exams. And I had not touched an adult in 10 years as a pediatrician. And, I learned that any physician of any specialty can do veteran disability exams. It's about step 3 level in terms of just assessing a patient's disability claims. It's an incredibly important service to our veterans in all the branches, and it's incredibly flexible and it can be very lucrative, and it's largely paperwork you can do from home. So began doing veteran disability exams. Few months later, was approached from someone else about being an expert on a case. And I thought expert witness work was all malpractice. It was throwing doctors under the bus. It was lawyers mad at me. It was me in a courtroom and someone accusing me of failing biochemistry. And, I have no business being a doctor. I thought our minds go to an episode of SVU every time, right? When we think about doing expert work, and was not that at all. It was a great experience. And from there, I began listing myself on directories and thought, you know what? It can be great. It's honestly rarely malpractice, almost never goes to trial, these cases. It's incredibly lucrative. As a physician, as a pediatrician, I'm charging $600 an hour and more to effectively work from home doing chart reviews and talking on the phone. So that was kind of the next steps for me in terms of doing all of these other gigs. I've done social security adjudications for people wanting social security benefits. You need experts to kind of opine on those cases, even for children who their families are seeking social security benefits. I talked about paid research studies. There are just so many. I've been an academic consultant. I've written test questions for different board exams. So the world is ripe with opportunity for physicians, okay? The things you may not even have heard of the things. We live in an age of technology. We can find things with AI. There are jobs popping up all of the time, every day. I would encourage all of your listeners to get curious, to reach out, click through things and then decide. And maybe it's not for you, but maybe pick up the phone, maybe apply anyway, maybe have a conversation. We're good at creating narratives around things that may or may not exist in reality. So have a conversation. If there's something you want, something you're even curious about, pick up the phone, have a conversation, apply. You may surprise yourself.
I love what you said. First of all, I'm very motivated and inspired by all of the things that you're doing on the side. I think it is incredible. Kudos to you for sure. Some of the lessons that I was taking away as you were talking that I think we could all benefit from is number one, find a niche within your specialty. Think about ways that you could maybe monetize that, whether you're in medicine or not. Like for you, you mentioned, hey, I was a pediatrician. I was kind of inspired to do Botox and fillers. Maybe it wasn't initially on my radar, but I've found this niche and I found that there is a need for it. And now I'm able to add to what I already do. I think that we could take away a lesson from that is like, all right, maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a doctor, maybe you do something entirely different. Is there a niche within your field that you could capitalize on? I know for some primary care doctors, they've gotten into weight loss and they're weight loss specialists now. And I think that's great. And now they've built up this concierge practice that is tailored to that. I know in
Mhm.
the world of sports medicine, there are different realms that people kind of niche
Yep.
themselves or carve themselves out, and they create an entire clinic or an
Mhm.
entire patient population within that niche. And so, is there a niche that you could consider? And maybe it's something that wasn't initially on your radar. So, that's one of the things is like finding a niche and capitalizing on that. I think another thing is so funny. I was kind of laughing to myself as you were talking about this was LinkedIn, because my experience is that a lot of doctors are not on LinkedIn or they do not keep up with their LinkedIn, right?
Mhm.
A lot of doctors may use Doximity, which we consider to be like the LinkedIn for doctors. But because most physicians don't find their clinical jobs through LinkedIn,
Mhm.
most of them don't keep up their LinkedIn. That's been my personal
Right.
experience. But it was so funny. I think 2 years ago or so, I was at a conference that was for healthcare professionals, but not doctors. It was my first time going to a conference of the sort. There were hundreds of people there, but I was like one of the only doctors there. And they were like people who were pharmacists or healthcare consultants or tech and that sort of thing. And it was my first time going to a conference like that. And I remember sitting outside of one of the sessions and kind of talking randomly to some of the vendors who happened to sit at my table. And I said, there are a lot of doctors who are kind of burned out from clinical medicine and would love to work in, your field. I think I was talking to somebody in healthcare tech or something like that. And she said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. There are a lot of doctors who would love to leave clinical medicine.
Yeah.
And one of the things that holds them back is this fear that they won't make as much outside of medicine as they could inside of medicine." And she was like, "Really? I think we pay pretty well." And I was like, "I think you do too. And she was like, "The doctors that work for us make multiple six figure.
Mhm.
It's a fun job. You go to
Mhm.
conferences, you speak, you do the vendor stuff." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I know so many doctors who would love to do
Yeah.
this kind of work or would love to transition into some sort of consulting work
Mhm.
or this kind of work." And she was like, "Really? They should reach out to us. They should get on LinkedIn. They
Yeah.
should contact us." And I was like, it's interesting because a lot of physicians are so busy that if somebody they don't
Yeah.
know contacts them or emails them, they're like
Yeah.
ignoring them, like,
Yep.
"Please don't talk to me. No,
Yep.
I'm not going to give you any of my time because my time is valuable and I already can't spend the little bit I do have doing what I want. I'm certainly not going to spend it talking to you that I don't know." But apparently, the outside world doesn't really operate like that, and they are more receptive to, like, these
Yes.
random LinkedIn messages and are very much like, "What's up on a call?" And you're like, "Really? You're gonna give me, like I get your undivided attention for 15 minutes?"
I'll say doctors, including myself, obviously, because I don't want to sound overly critical, but now I literally, like you, I talk to doctors every day. I coach them around all of this, around these transitions, around being visible. We think everyone is out to get us, in that we assumed we would have the income we want. We'd be treated the way we want to be. We assumed we'd be taken care of on this side. So it's like, oh, there's someone calling me, a locums job that's saying it will pay more than I'm making, or a non-clinical job. But so many doctors are even scared to pick up the phone and they'll say, well, how do I know it's not a scam? And it's like, well, just talk to them. Please don't give your bank information. I don't think they'll ask for it, but have a conversation, have a series of conversations. But we're scared to even enter into them. And again, I think we were hamstrung as residents. We were not taught how to find jobs. We were not given permission to get on LinkedIn. It wasn't one of our ACGME requirements. And I think we do have that. We're so used to being spoon fed every ounce of permission and education around these things. So the prospect of doing it on your own can be incredibly intimidating. I'm just talking to someone who's in another company, who's not a doctor, who's in another state, who's saying these things, maybe using words I've never heard of. We don't want to sound dumb, so we don't kind of ask clarifying questions. We maybe don't even enter into those conversations. So you're absolutely right. Doximity is like only doctors are there. But if you're looking, as so many doctors are, for non-clinical opportunities, it goes back to not waiting for permission. It goes to being curious, and it goes to just starting to really engage in these other opportunities and trust yourself. If something doesn't sound right to you, you don't have to do it. You don't have to call them back. If someone's rubbing you the wrong way, you don't have to. You don't have to continue. But sometimes that fear even keeps us from engaging in the first place. And that, I believe, holds us back every time.
Yeah. And so just to even wrap up some of these points, I think that's important of like not letting fear hold you back and being willing to take a risk and put yourself out there. I think that segues into being visible. Maybe your first step after listening to this episode is I'm going to get on LinkedIn and update my
Please.
profile that hasn't been
Yes.
updated in 5 years, right? And I'm going to come up with and take a search and reach out to companies or people that I find interesting that are doing interesting work. And yes, you might get ignored, but some people might respond to you and then you get more information. I
That's
think
right.
finding a niche within your career field, whether you're a doctor or not, like finding a niche and maybe finding a way to think creatively about how you can monetize that particular niche if your goal is to make more side income. And then I think the last thing is to reach out to other people. reach out to other people. Sometimes I get new ideas by talking to people that I haven't spoken to before, whether it's physicians within your circle or maybe outside of your social circle. Kind of put
Mhm.
yourself out there. If there's an event, maybe start going. I remember when I was getting into real estate, I would go to these real estate meetups and people knew way more than I did. But just by virtue of being in the room, I
Mhm.
made these connections and I started learning more and then
Mhm.
kind of blossomed from there. And so I would encourage you to kind of put yourself out there and being willing to talk with other folks. So this has been great. I'm inspired. I'm like, maybe I should consider expert witness work. I don't know.
You should.
So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your pearls of wisdom. And now let's get into some fun money. What's something fun that you're doing with money, or what's another trip that you're taking?
We'll stay on that theme. I was invited to Carnival in Trinidad in February.
Oh,
So I think
wow.
I'm going to do that. I've talked about my 2026 travel. Now we're into 2027. And a friend just said, "Hey, do you want to go to Trinidad?" And I guess I'm going to wear all the feathers and the small swimsuits. So, we're going to talk about our fitness and diet plans later, but that will be something coming up in 2027. And I've never been to Trinidad and haven't been to the Caribbean in a while. Living on the West Coast is just harder to get to the Caribbean. So I don't go as much, so I'm excited. What about you?
I am going to Mexico City. I have not been to Mexico City. One of my friends, who's a physician in California, actually, her birthday is coming up. And she was like, Lisha, I think I want to take a girls' trip to Mexico City. And she was like, will you join me? And I was like, girl, you ain't said nothing but a thing. You already know I'm going to join you. And so, yeah, so that flight is booked and the stay is booked. And so we are having a really fun girls' weekend in Mexico City. I've been to Mexico like a million times. I'm from Florida. Cancun is like a hop and a skip away. And when I lived on the West Coast, I had gone to Cabo because that's also a hop and a skip away from the West Coast. But I never gone to Mexico City. So I'm actually really excited to explore that part.
It's great. You'll have a great time. I have a physician friend who is going on sabbatical from work. She has reached her limit and she's actually going to spend 3 months in Mexico City getting an apartment. And I'm thinking about visiting her sometime in the fall and trying to get to Oaxaca. So I love this.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. So you might be going too. I love it. I love it.
Let's all go.
But this has been great. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully, you, as our listeners, have found something helpful from this episode. So find a niche, put yourself out there, and try to think creatively about ways that you, too, can supplement your income. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for Dr. Lisha Taylor. Just so you know, she's not a financial advisor, tax professional, lawyer, or financial planner. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment. Chat with a tax professional and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.